Blake Lively's journey through this bizarre legal move and the shocking witness Backfire was never just about a courtroom battle. It was a storm that shook the very foundation of her spirit, her identity, and her humanity. For years, she had been seen as a golden figure of Hollywood, adored by millions, respected by peers, and shielded by a public image polished to perfection. But when the storm came, it tore through every layer of protection and exposed a fragile truth that even the brightest stars can feel powerless. Fame is not only a crown. Fame is also a cage that shines on the outside but cuts on the inside. Inside the courtroom, Blake was not the glamorous celebrity audiences had watched on red carpets in shimmering gowns. She was not the woman who lit up screens with her effortless charm. She was stripped of that protective layer that Hollywood often provides. Every gaze felt heavy. Every whisper carried weight. Every testimony echoed like a hammer against her ribs. The air inside the courtroom was tense and unkind. The world watched her not as a beloved actress, but as a figure under scrutiny. She stood tall, calm on the outside as cameras captured her every blink, but inside her heart was breaking. The witness testimony meant to destroy her was supposed to be the nail in the coffin. It was supposed to crush her defense and stain her reputation forever. Yet in an unexpected twist, it collapsed under its own weight. Words contradicted themselves, facts did not align, and the one strong voice turned into confusion. The courtroom gasped. The backfire was undeniable. But even though the testimony failed, its scars remained. It revealed how fragile perception could be. It showed that truth could be bent, twisted, and weaponized by a single voice, even if that voice could not hold. For Blake, it was a reminder that fame offered no real shield. And then came the media storm, a storm that was both cruel and compassionate, pulling her in two directions at once. Millions of people rushed to social media to weigh in. Some defended her fiercely, calling her a victim of injustice, a mother, and a wife doing everything possible to protect her family. They wrote long threads filled with admiration, recounting her years of kindness, her charity work, and her warmth. Others, however, saw her as reckless, painting her actions as strange and dangerous. The debate grew louder. Hashtags rose and fell like waves crashing against the shore. Headlines sharpened like knives, ready to carve into her every move. The same world that once admired her beauty now dissected her life like a puzzle. But within that chaos, there were lights that refused to dim. Loyal fans who had followed her since the days of Gossip Girl spoke out passionately. They reminded everyone of her heart, her generosity, her quiet acts of kindness, often hidden from cameras. They spoke about the Blake who stopped to talk with fans of Blake, who supported charities without needing headlines, of Blake who showed warmth when the world was cold. These voices became her shield when everything else felt heavy. They built walls of words around her, reminding the world that she was more than a scandal. She was more than a headline, she was human. Yet the truth remained harsh. Fame is never safe. Perception is power, and once perception shifts, it becomes almost impossible to control again. Blake's name was no longer tied only to her films or fashion, or her family moments shared online. It was now tied to a bizarre legal twist that had shaken the careful image she had built. She knew every step she took from this point forward would be watched carefully. Every word she spoke would be weighed against public opinion. Every silence would be judged as if it carried a meaning deeper than her intentions. And so the haunting questions began to rise. How does a woman rebuild when the world has already written its story about her? How does she protect her children when every headline threatens to follow them into the classrooms of the future? How does she carry the love of fans while also enduring the crushing weight of their expectations? These were not questions of law alone. These were questions of survival, of identity, of a human heart caught between truth and perception. Blake Lively had shown resilience before. She had shown the world that beneath the glamour lay a woman of substance and strength. She had stood tall through challenges and proven her voice mattered. But this storm was different. This was not about a movie role or a fashion moment or even a career decision. This was about her essence, her reputation, her motherhood, her humanity. Could she rise above the storm as she had risen above others, or would this bizarre legal move remain a shadow stretching behind her for years to come? One thing was certain: Blake Lively's story was not finished. It was still being written not just in courtrooms, but in newsrooms and in the hearts of her fans. Each headline was a sentence in her evolving narrative, each hashtag a punctuation mark. And as the world watched, one question lingered quietly yet powerfully. When the storm passes, who will Blake Lively be? Will she be the broken star forever defined by scandal, or will she be the resilient woman who proved her greatest strength was never her beauty, never her fame, not even her roles, but her unshakable heart that refused to surrender? The days after the courtroom chaos unfolded like a drama that no screenwriter could have written. The failed testimony echoed not only within those walls, but across the globe. News anchors replayed clips of the witness struggling, stumbling, and finally crumbling under pressure. Social media turned those clips into endless loops, memes, and debates. The world was no longer just an observer. The world became a judge, a jury, and sometimes even an executioner. And at the center of it all was Blake Lively, a woman who had never asked for this storm, but who was forced to weather it. For many, the image of Blake sitting in that courtroom became iconic. Her posture straight, her expression calm, yet her eyes betraying exhaustion spoke volumes. She was not only defending herself against legal attacks, she was defending herself against an invisible army of critics whose words arrived not in person, but through screens and keyboards. She became a subject not only of law, but of opinion. Every headline shaped her story, every tweet reshaped her image. And while some tweets were filled with support, others cut deep like blades dipped in venom. The cruelty of the digital world revealed itself quickly. Some accused her of arrogance, of trying to outsmart a system that eventually turns on everyone. Others dismissed her as just another celebrity using her wealth and influence to escape accountability. Rumors spread at the speed of light, each more twisted than the last. Even silence from her side was weaponized. Why is she not speaking? What is she hiding? Silence means guilt. These statements filled comment sections, drowning out nuance and truth. But in the same breath, the digital world also offered compassion. Hashtags of solidarity began to rise. Supporters changed their profile pictures to images of Blake smiling, at premieres reminding the world of who she really was. Long threads celebrated her roles, from Serena van der Woodsen to her powerful performances in thrillers, reminding people that she was more than a headline. She was an artist who had touched lives through her work. Fans wrote about her charity donations, her visits to hospitals, her efforts to uplift others when cameras were not rolling. These voices, though quieter than the storm of hate, carried a weight of sincerity that could not be ignored. The contradiction was almost unbearable. How could one woman be painted as both villain and victim at the same time? How could her every move be dissected like a symbol when she was just a human navigating fear, confusion, and pain? The truth is, fame had magnified everything. It had magnified her beauty, her talent, her joy, and now it magnified her suffering. The same spotlight that once made her glow now exposed every crack. Fame had never been a shield. Fame was glass, clear, fragile, and shattering under pressure. Inside Blake's private world, the weight was heavier than the public could imagine. Behind closed doors, she was not a headline or a trending hashtag. She was a mother holding her children, a wife leaning on her partner, a woman trying to gather pieces of herself while the world demanded explanations. Every night carried the same questions. What will tomorrow bring? What new headline will attack me? What rumor will haunt my daughters when they are old enough to read? The fear was not only about her own pain. The fear was about legacy, about scars passed on to the next generation through headlines and whispers. Ryan Reynolds, by her side, faced a storm too. Known for his wit and humor, his usual armor was silenced this time. His jokes that often disarmed critics could not erase the gravity of the moment. For him, it was not about protecting an image. It was about protecting the woman he loved and the family they had built. Fans speculated about his every move, every silence, every appearance. But behind those closed doors, he stood as her anchor, quietly steady, never wavering. Together, they carried the weight of both love and fear, a combination that made every step more fragile and every bond more sacred. The legal aspect of the case faded in and out of focus. Lawyers debated strategies in hushed voices, while cameras caught every moment outside the courthouse. Analysts filled television slots with theories, predictions, and analysis. But for the public, the case was never truly about legalities. It was about perception. Was Blake guilty of misjudgment? Was she reckless, or was she courageous? Was she a victim or manipulator? These questions floated endlessly, rarely seeking answers, but always demanding attention. And as the world debated her life, Blake herself found little room for her own voice. She knew that whatever she said would be twisted, magnified, or ignored depending on the lens through which people viewed her. To speak meant risking misinterpretation. To remain silent meant risking judgment. It was a paradox, a trap with no easy exit. So she carried on her silence, measured her appearances careful, and her dignity intact, even as the storm threatened to rip it away. But storms have a way of testing not only the person at the center, but also those watching. For every cruel headline, there were readers who saw through the noise. For every cruel tweet, there was a response of kindness. People began asking larger questions about celebrity culture, about the cost of fame, about the way society consumes scandal like entertainment. Some saw Blake's struggle as a mirror, reflecting the dangers of a world that feeds on judgment and thrives on downfall. Others saw it as a cautionary tale, that no matter how perfect a life may seem, one storm can change everything. And within that reflection, one question grew louder. Why do we find joy in the suffering of others? Why do we celebrate the fall of those we once raised high? Blake's story became more than hers alone. It became a commentary on all of us, on the hunger for spectacle, the cruelty of curiosity, and the fragile humanity behind every headline. As days turned into weeks, the noise refused to fade. If anything, it grew louder. Every magazine cover carried her face. Every entertainment program dissected her steps, as if they were decoding hidden messages. The courtroom had been the stage of bizarre legal twists, but the world outside had become a theater of endless speculation. And in that theater, Blake Lively was both the star and the target. She had lived under the gaze of cameras for years. She had smiled at red carpets, posed gracefully for photographs, and answered interviews with warmth. But now the same cameras captured something different. They captured exhaustion in her eyes, tension in her shoulders, a stillness in her steps that revealed the weight she carried. It was no longer performance of a star. It was the endurance of a woman simply trying to keep moving forward. The witness bombshell that was meant to destroy her had collapsed spectacularly. Experts described it as one of the strangest courtroom moments in recent celebrity history. Yet even in its collapse, it left wounds. Perception had shifted and scars had formed. The damage was less about the facts and more about the story people chose to believe. Because once a narrative enters the public imagination, truth becomes secondary. People remember the drama, the whispers, the hashtags, not the quiet facts hidden in transcripts. For Blake, this realization was devastating. She had always believed that honesty and grace would be enough, that if she carried herself with dignity, the world would understand. But the storm taught her a painful truth. Dignity is not always loud enough to drown out the noise. Sometimes, no matter how careful you live your life, it only takes one bizarre turn for the world to